In the vast wilderness of Montana, 60-year-old Jack Morrison thought he'd seen everything during his decades of hiking these ancient mountains. That changed on a crisp October night when a blazing streak tore across the star-filled sky, crashing somewhere deep in the Blackfoot Forest. What his loyal German shepherd Rex discovered the next morning would shatter everything Jack believed about our place in the universe. The metallic object, half buried in the crater, wasn't just debris from space. It pulsed with an otherworldly light, and within hours, the wildlife began acting in ways that defied explanation. Electronic devices failed throughout the nearby town of Cedar Falls, and people started experiencing vivid, shared dreams. As Jack delved deeper into the mystery, he realized this wasn't a random cosmic accident. Something had deliberately chosen this remote corner of Montana. But why here, and what did it want with humanity? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun filtered through the pine canopy as Jack Morrison adjusted his worn hiking boots and checked his compass one more time. Rex paced restlessly beside him, ears pricked forward, nose twitching at scents that seemed to unsettle the normally calm German shepherd. After 30 years as a forest ranger in these mountains, Jack had developed an instinct for when something was wrong in the wilderness. Today, every fiber of his being screamed that wrongness. The trek to the crash site took them deeper into the Blackfoot Forest than Jack had ventured in months. Since Martha's passing 2 years ago, these solitary hikes with Rex had become his meditation, his way of processing grief and finding peace in the cathedral silence of ancient trees. But this morning felt different. The usual symphony of birdsong was muted, replaced by an odd humming that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. Rex suddenly stopped, hackles rising as he stared ahead through the undergrowth. Jack followed his gaze and felt his breath catch in his throat. The trees ahead were bent outward in a perfect circle, their trunks twisted but not broken, as if some invisible force had gently pushed them aside. At the center of this natural amphitheater lay a crater roughly 20 feet across, its edges smooth and glassy, and there, half buried in the dark earth, sat something that definitely wasn't a meteorite. The metallic sphere was perhaps 4 feet in diameter, its surface a deep bronze color that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury in the dappled sunlight. Most unsettling of all was the soft blue light that pulsed rhythmically from within, like a massive heartbeat made visible. Jack's compass needle spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north, while his GPS unit displayed nothing but static. Rex whined softly, torn between his natural curiosity and an obvious desire to flee. Jack understood the feeling. Every rational part of his mind told him to back away, to report this to the authorities and let someone else deal with whatever this thing was. But something deeper, a pull he couldn't explain, drew him forward. He'd always been methodical, a trait that had served him well during his decades managing these federal lands. Martha used to tease him about his detailed journals, his careful documentation of wildlife patterns and weather observations. "You notice everything, Jack," she'd say with that gentle smile that still visited his dreams. "It's like you're keeping watch over the whole world." Now, that same careful attention to detail told him this was no natural phenomenon. The crater showed no signs of the violent impact that should have accompanied a meteorite strike. No scattered debris, no scorched earth, no radiating fracture patterns. Instead, the ground looked almost cultivated, as if the sphere had grown there rather than fallen from the sky. Jack pulled out his phone to document the scene, but the device remained frustratingly dead despite showing a full charge the night before. His backup camera suffered the same fate. Whatever this thing was, it didn't play well with electronics. Rex had begun circling the crater's perimeter, stopping every few feet to sniff deeply before moving on. His behavior reminded Jack of the way the dog acted around wounded animals, curious but protective, as if sensing something vulnerable that needed care rather than something dangerous to be feared. The sphere's pulsing light seemed to respond to their presence, growing slightly brighter as Jack approached the crater's edge. He could feel warmth radiating from the object, not the scorching heat he might expect from something that had streaked through the atmosphere, but a gentle warmth like sunlight on skin. Years of experience had taught Jack when to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were sending him conflicting signals. The rational part of his mind catalogued all the reasons to be afraid, to maintain a safe distance and call for backup. But another part, the part that had guided him safely through countless wilderness emergencies, whispered that whatever this was, it wasn't malevolent. Rex suddenly sat down beside the crater and tilted his head, ears forward in the universal canine expression of intense listening. Jack strained his own ears, but heard nothing beyond the usual forest sounds. Yet Rex remained motionless, as if receiving information from a frequency beyond human perception. The sphere's pulse quickened slightly, and Jack could swear he felt an answering rhythm in his own chest. Not his heartbeat, but something deeper, like a tuning fork, had been struck somewhere in his bones. The sensation wasn't unpleasant, more like the feeling of recognition when meeting an old friend after years apart. Martha would have known what to do. She'd always been the intuitive one in their partnership, able to read people and situations with an empathy that complemented his methodical approach. "Sometimes, Jack," she told him during one of their last conversations before the cancer took her, "the most important discoveries come when we stop analyzing and start listening." Standing at the edge of this impossible crater, watching his dog commune with something that shouldn't exist, Jack made a decision that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone in Cedar Falls. Instead of walking away, instead of reporting this to authorities who would cordon off the area and turn it into a media circus, he would listen, he would document everything he could, learn what this thing was and what it wanted, and only then decide who needed to know about it. Rex looked up at him and wagged his tail once, as if approving of the decision. Together, they settled in to begin their watch over humanity's first confirmed contact with something not of this world. The drive back to Cedar Falls felt longer than usual. Every mile weighted with the knowledge of what Jack had left behind in the forest. Rex sat unusually alert in the passenger seat, his metal collar tag catching the afternoon light as it vibrated against the truck's dashboard with a faint, rhythmic chiming that hadn't been there that morning. Cedar Falls stretched along the valley floor like a postcard from simpler times, its main street lined with weathered storefronts and the kind of honest businesses that had served 3 generations of families. Population 847, according to the welcome sign, though Jack suspected that number had dropped since the mill closed 5 years back. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where secrets didn't last long, and where strange stories spread faster than wildfire. Sheriff Maria Santos was refilling her coffee cup at Millie's diner when Jack found her, her patrol uniform crisp despite the long day evident in her tired eyes. At 45, Maria had seen Cedar Falls through its share of troubles, from domestic disputes to the occasional tourist mishap. But nothing had prepared her for the conversation Jack was about to initiate. "Jack, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, gesturing to the empty booth across from her. "Everything all right out there in the woods?" Jack slid into the worn vinyl seat, choosing his words carefully. "Maria, I need to report something unusual. Found some debris in the Blackfoot Forest that doesn't look like anything I've seen before." Rex's collar tag suddenly emitted a sharp, high-pitched whine that made both humans wince. The dog pawed at his neck, clearly distressed by the sound, while other patrons in the diner turned to stare at the electronic noise. "That's new," Jack muttered, reaching over to examine the simple metal tag that had been silent for the 3 years Rex had worn it. The surface felt warm to the touch, and when he looked closely, he could swear he saw faint patterns etched into the metal that hadn't been there before. Maria's radio crackled to life with reports from across town. Dead cell phone batteries despite full charges that morning. Car radios picking up frequencies that shouldn't exist. The automated teller at the bank displaying gibberish instead of account balances. Electronic devices throughout Cedar Falls were experiencing inexplicable malfunctions. "Been getting these calls all afternoon," Maria said, adjusting the volume on her radio. "Started around noon. You think this debris of yours has something to do with it?" Before Jack could answer, Dr. Ellen Hayes burst through the diner's front door, her usually composed demeanor replaced by barely contained excitement. At 62, Ellen had retired from her position as a university physics professor to the quiet life of Cedar Falls' only doctor. But the scientist in her had never fully retreated. "Maria, thank goodness you're here," Ellen said, slightly out of breath. "I've been documenting the most extraordinary electromagnetic phenomena. Every sensitive instrument in my office has gone haywire. The readings are off the charts, like nothing I've ever seen." Jack and Maria exchanged glances as Ellen slid into the booth beside them, pulling out a tablet that flickered erratically as she tried to show them her data. "It's not just the electronics," Ellen continued. "I've had 6 patients today reporting the same thing. Vivid dreams last night, all sharing common elements. Flying through space, seeing Earth from impossible distances, feeling connected to something vast and ancient," Rex whined again, his collar tag now emitting a steady pulse of sound that seemed to resonate with Ellen's malfunctioning tablet. The device's screen suddenly stabilized, displaying a complex waveform pattern that pulsed in perfect synchronization with the dog's collar. "That's impossible," Ellen whispered, staring at the screen. "The frequency match is exact. How is a simple dog tag generating the same electromagnetic signature as whatever's affecting our entire town?" Jack felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. He could continue to keep the sphere's existence secret, let the authorities dismiss these events as some kind of mass hysteria or equipment malfunction, or he could trust these 2 women, both pillars of the community, with knowledge that would change everything. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly librarian who lived next door to Jack, approached their table with shaking hands. At 78, Agnes Patterson had been the town's unofficial keeper of stories for decades. But the fear in her eyes was something new. "Sheriff Santos," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to report something strange. Last night I dreamed I was flying through the stars, seeing our world as just a tiny blue dot in an ocean of darkness. But it wasn't a dream, was it? It felt more real than this conversation." She looked directly at Rex, whose collar tag had gone completely silent. "And I could swear that dog was there with me somehow, like he was my guide through all that emptiness." The diner had grown quiet around them, other patrons unconsciously leaning in to hear Agnes's words. Jack realized that whatever had crashed in the Blackfoot Forest wasn't content to remain hidden. It was reaching out, touching the minds and dreams of everyone in town, using even something as simple as Rex's collar tag to announce its presence. The time for secrecy was ending, whether Jack was ready or not. 3 days after the crash, Jack returned to the sphere with Dr. Hayes in tow, her scientific instruments packed in a military surplus backpack that had seen better decades. The forest felt different now, charged with an energy that made the hair on their arms stand on end and caused Rex to pace in nervous circles around the crater's edge. The sphere itself had changed. Hairline cracks now spider-webbed across its bronze surface, and from within those fissures, tiny crystalline fragments caught the morning light like captured stars. One particular crystal, no larger than Jack's thumb, had worked its way partially free from the sphere's surface, pulsing with an inner light that seemed to respond to their heartbeats. "Remarkable," Ellen whispered, adjusting her electromagnetic field detector. "The readings are unlike anything in our scientific literature. It's as if the object is becoming more active, more responsive to our presence." Jack reached toward the protruding crystal, drawn by an instinct he couldn't name. The moment his fingertips made contact with its surface, the world exploded into sensation and memory that wasn't his own. He was flying through the vast emptiness between stars, part of a consciousness that spanned galaxies. Around him, others of his kind shared their thoughts in harmonious waves of understanding. Their world was dying, its resources depleted, its atmosphere poisoned by centuries of industrial expansion. The decision to flee hadn't been easy, but necessity had driven them from their home toward distant worlds that might sustain life. The journey had taken generations, their consciousness preserved in crystalline matrices, while their physical forms lay dormant in protective pods scattered across dozens of ships. Earth had been chosen carefully, its electromagnetic signature promising compatibility with their technology, its diverse biosphere suggesting the resilience they would need to rebuild their civilization. But something had gone wrong. The other ships, the rest of his people, were still years away from arrival. His pod had been damaged during transit, forced to make an emergency landing in this remote wilderness. Without the support of his collective, without the shared consciousness that had sustained his species for millennia, he was dying, Jack gasped, stumbling backward as the visions released their grip on his mind. Ellen caught his arm, her face etched with concern as she studied the readings on her instruments. "Jack, your vital signs spiked dramatically." "What happened?" "I saw it," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "It's memories. It's people. They're refugees, Ellen, running from a dying world, looking for a new home." The crystal fragment pulsed brighter, and suddenly Jack could feel a presence touching the edges of his consciousness. Not invasive or threatening, but tentative, like a shy child reaching out for human contact. "You understand," came a voice that wasn't quite a voice, more like concepts forming directly in his mind. "I'd hoped, but so few of your kind can hear us clearly." Rex barked once, sharp and commanding, as if he too could sense the alien presence. The dog positioned himself between Jack and the sphere, not aggressively, but protectively, as though standing guard over a fragile communication. "The animal sees truly," the voice continued. "His mind is open to frequencies your species has largely abandoned. Through him, we might bridge the gap between our ways of thinking." Ellen's instruments were going wild, electromagnetic readings fluctuating in patterns that suggested complex information transfer. "Jack, something is happening. The energy patterns are incredibly sophisticated, almost like language," Jack finished. "It's trying to communicate." The presence in his mind grew stronger, sharing not just words but emotions, sensations, fragments of understanding about a species that had lived among the stars for eons, before Earth's first forests took root. "My name, in concepts your mind can grasp, is Kethmore. I am, or was, a keeper of memories for my people. Now I am simply lost, far from home, with knowledge that dies with me unless it can be preserved." Images flooded Jack's consciousness. Vast cities that floated among clouds of interstellar gas. Technologies that could harness the energy of entire star systems. Art forms that sculpted space and time itself into expressions of beauty beyond human comprehension. And underneath it all, the terrible sadness of a people who had exhausted their world and now wandered the galaxy seeking redemption. But the connection was taking its toll. Jack could feel his own memories beginning to blur, his sense of individual identity wavering under the weight of alien thought patterns. Ellen noticed his distress immediately, pulling him away from the crystal's influence. "That's enough," she said firmly. "Whatever's happening, it's affecting your neural patterns. We need to approach this more carefully." As Jack's mind cleared, he became aware of the sounds around them. In the distance, animals were moving through the forest with unusual urgency. Birds flew overhead in formations that defied their normal territorial behavior, all heading away from the crash site. Even the insects had gone silent, as if some primal instinct was driving the local wildlife to evacuate. Rex whined, his attention split between the sphere and the sounds of mass animal migration echoing through the trees. The dog's collar tag had begun emitting a complex series of tones, almost like a translation device, attempting to make sense of multiple languages at once. "Ellen," Jack said, his voice steady despite the revelations churning in his mind. "We need to get back to town. If this Kethmore is telling the truth, if there really are more of them coming, then what happens here in the next few days might determine whether we're looking at peaceful first contact or something much more dangerous." The crystal fragment pulsed one more time, and Jack felt a final message from the alien consciousness. "Your people fear what they do not understand. But fear and understanding cannot coexist. Choose wisely, Jack Morrison, for both our species depend upon the choices made in the days to come." As they packed up Ellen's equipment and prepared to return to Cedar Falls, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking away from the most important moment in human history. The crystal fragment continued to glow within the sphere's cracked surface, a beacon that would soon draw attention from forces far less benevolent than a curious forest ranger and a retired physics professor. Behind them, the forest grew quiet, except for the distant sounds of fleeing wildlife, as if nature itself understood that everything was about to change. The communication array materialized over the course of a week, growing from the sphere like a metallic flower blooming in fast motion. Crystalline tendrils emerged from the cracks in Kethmore's pod, seeking out the town's cellular towers, power lines, and radio antennas with an intelligence that both fascinated and terrified Dr. Hayes. "It's not destroying our infrastructure." Ellen explained to the emergency town meeting that Sheriff Santos had called in the community center. "It's integrating with it. Look at these readings." Her laptop, now mysteriously functional despite the ongoing electromagnetic interference, displayed waveform patterns that pulsed in harmony with the alien technology. The communication array had somehow learned to speak in frequencies that human electronics could understand, creating a bridge between two vastly different technological approaches. Jack stood at the back of the crowded room. Rex pressed close against his legs as townspeople voiced their fears and frustrations. The past week had seen Cedar Falls split into distinct camps, those who wanted to flee, those who demanded military intervention, and a growing number who spoke of their dreams with wonder rather than terror. "My grandson called from college yesterday," said Bill Henderson, the local mechanic. "His phone worked fine, clearer than it's been in months. Whatever that thing is doing to our systems, it's not breaking them. It's improving them." Margaret Reeves, who ran the general store, stood up with obvious reluctance. "I don't care if it fixes every electronic device in town. It's reading our minds. Those dreams aren't natural. Something alien is poking around inside our heads while we sleep." The room erupted in argument until Sheriff Santos banged her gavel for order. "We need facts, not fear," she said firmly. "Dr. Hayes, what exactly are we dealing with?" Ellen activated her presentation, the screen displaying clear two-way communication patterns. "Based on my analysis and Jack's direct contact experience, we're dealing with a refugee. A single individual from a species that has mastered interstellar travel but lost their homeworld to environmental collapse. The communication array had enabled her first real conversation with Kethmore the previous evening. Using Rex as a conduit, the alien consciousness had explained its desperate situation with a clarity that left no room for doubt about its intentions. "I am dying," Kethmore had told them through the neural link. "My pod was damaged during the journey. Without connection to my people's collective consciousness, my individual awareness cannot sustain itself much longer. But I carry within me the accumulated knowledge of 1,000,000 years of civilization. That knowledge must not die with me." Jack stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of sleepless nights spent in communion with an alien mind. "It's asking for asylum. Kethmore needs a human host consciousness to survive until its people arrive. Not to take over or control, but to exist in partnership." The room fell silent, except for the soft humming of the communication array, which had somehow linked itself to the community center's public address system. When Kethmore's translated voice emerged from the speakers, every person present could understand it, despite the alien origins of the thoughts. "People of Cedar Falls," the voice said, carrying harmonics that spoke directly to human emotional centers. I understand your fear. My species felt the same when we first encountered other forms of consciousness among the stars. But we learned that diversity of thought strengthens both parties in the partnership. Young Timothy Chen, home from Montana State University for the weekend, raised his hand. What about the others? You said more of your people are coming. What happens when they arrive? My people are scattered across many ships, traveling different paths to avoid detection by those who would destroy refugees. Some ships carry families, others hold our libraries and cultural archives. A few transport the agricultural specialists who will help us cultivate food without depleting your world's resources as we did our own. Mrs. Patterson, who had become something of a liaison between Kethmore and the elderly residents, spoke up from her front row seat. How many are we talking about? Perhaps 10,000 individuals across all the ships. Enough to preserve our species, not enough to overwhelm yours. We seek coexistence, not conquest. The communication array pulsed brighter as Kethmore continued. I offer proof of our peaceful intentions. Through this array, your people can access portions of our technological knowledge. Clean energy systems, medical techniques that can extend healthy human lifespans. Methods of agriculture that heal rather than exhaust the soil. Rex suddenly stood up, his collar tag chiming in harmony with the communication array as he walked to the center of the room. The dog sat down facing the crowd, and when he spoke, it was with Keithmore's voice channeled through their telepathic link. I have chosen this human family as my hosts because their minds are open to new possibilities. Jack Morrison carries my memories now, sharing his consciousness with mine. Together, we are neither fully human nor fully Zephyrian, but something new. The demonstration sent ripples of amazement and fear through the crowd. Some people moved toward the exits, while others leaned forward with obvious fascination. Sheriff Santos looked directly at Jack, reading the exhaustion and determination in his weathered features. Jack, what's it like? Sharing your mind with that? Jack was quiet for a long moment, feeling Kethmore's ancient sadness mixing with his own grief for Martha, finding comfort in the alien's understanding of loss. It's like having a wise friend who's seen things I can't imagine, but who understands that home and family matter most. Martha always said I was too set in my ways. Maybe this is the universe's way of teaching an old dog new tricks. The communication array dimmed to a gentle glow as Kethmore withdrew from the public link, leaving the townspeople to debate humanity's first diplomatic decision with an alien species. Agent Richardson arrived with the dawn, his black SUV convoy cutting through Cedar Falls' morning quiet like a blade through silk. Federal plates, tinted windows, and the kind of purposeful efficiency that spoke of protocols designed for situations that officially didn't exist. Jack was feeding Rex behind his cabin when the resonant stone first made itself known. About the size of a silver dollar, but weighing far more than it should. The crystalline device had emerged from Kethmore's pod during the night, working its way through the forest floor to rest on Jack's doorstep like a gift from an old friend. The moment his fingers closed around it, Jack's connection to Kethmore exploded into clarity so intense it drove him to his knees. They come with weapons and fear. Kethmore's consciousness flooded through him. Those who would cage what they cannot understand. The resonant stone will deepen our link, but the cost to your human mind will be severe. Use it only if you must. Through Kethmore's senses, Jack could perceive the approaching vehicles as electromagnetic signatures. Their occupants' heightened stress levels, reading like heat signatures against the cool morning air. More troubling were the detection devices they carried. Instruments specifically designed to locate and contain extraterrestrial technology. Sheriff Santos intercepted the convoy at the town limits, her patrol car looking absurdly small beside the federal vehicles. Through the squad car's radio, which the communication array had enhanced beyond its normal range, Jack heard her terse conversation with Agent Richardson. This is a federal matter now, Sheriff. We'll need complete cooperation and immediate access to any individuals who've had contact with the anomalous material. That would be most of the town, Maria replied evenly. Whatever that thing in the forest is, it's been broadcasting to everyone with working ears. Dr. Hayes appeared at Jack's door just as the federal agents began their sweep of the town center, her usually composed demeanor replaced by barely controlled urgency. They've requisitioned my lab equipment, everything. They claim they need it for threat assessment and containment protocols. Jack clutched the resonance stone tighter, feeling its warm surface pulse in rhythm with his accelerated heartbeat. Ellen, we need to get back to the pod before they do. There are things Kethmore needs to show us, things that might change how we handle this first contact. But even as they spoke, the communication array's gentle humming took on a discordant note. Through their enhanced connection, Jack could sense Kethmore's distress as federal scanning equipment began probing the alien technology with techniques that felt invasive and harmful. Rex suddenly bolted from the cabin, his enhanced intelligence driving him toward the forest with purpose that transcended ordinary canine behavior. When he returned 20 minutes later, the dog carried something in his mouth that made both humans step back in surprise. It was a small metallic cylinder, similar in appearance to Kethmore's pod, but obviously of human manufacture. Crude welding marks and military-standard electronics suggested it had been hastily constructed to mimic alien technology. "They've been here before," Ellen whispered, examining the device with growing horror. "This is human-made, designed to interface with extraterrestrial systems. How long have they known?" The resonant stone in Jack's hand grew almost uncomfortably warm as Kethmore's urgency flooded through their connection. Images flashed through Jack's mind, other crash sites, other first contacts that had ended in capture and experimentation rather than communication and understanding. "My predecessor scouts," Kethmore explained through the neural link. "3 pods landed in your territory over the past decade. The beings within them were taken, studied, dissected. Their consciousness was harvested and stored in devices like the one your companion has found." Jack felt his human memories beginning to blur at the edges as the alien consciousness pressed closer, sharing knowledge that human minds weren't designed to process. Through Kethmore's perception, he could see the approaching federal agents as they truly were, not protectors of humanity, but collectors of alien intelligence. "Ellen," Jack gasped, fighting to maintain his individual identity against the overwhelming flow of alien memory. "They're not here to help. They're here to harvest whatever they can from Kethmore, just like they did to the others." Rex's collar tag began emitting a complex series of tones, and suddenly Jack understood that the dog's enhanced abilities weren't entirely the result of Kethmore's influence. Embedded in the simple metal tag was technology of human origin, designed to monitor and control telepathic abilities. The realization hit them simultaneously. Rex had been prepared for this contact, conditioned to serve as a bridge between human and alien consciousness. The federal agents hadn't come in response to recent events. They had been waiting for this moment, using Jack and his beloved companion as unwitting tools in a larger plan. Through the communication array's network, they could hear Agent Richardson coordinating the systematic capture of everyone who had experienced direct contact with alien technology. But his orders carried a chilling specificity that suggested this wasn't humanity's first rodeo with extraterrestrial refugees. The resonance stone pulsed one final time before going dark, as if Kethmore had suddenly withdrawn from their shared consciousness. In the distance, they could hear vehicles approaching Jack's cabin, their occupants armed with more than just questions. The bio-sync chamber revealed itself 3 days after the federal lockdown. Emerging from what Jack had assumed was a natural cave formation, deeper in the Blackfoot Forest. Ellen discovered it while following Rex through a series of underground passages that seemed to extend far beyond what any geological survey had ever mapped. "Jack, you need to see this." Ellen's voice crackled through the modified radio equipment they'd cobbled together to avoid federal surveillance. "Rex led me to something that defies everything we know about this area." The chamber was roughly circular, its walls lined with the same bronze material as Kethmore's pod. But the technology here was clearly far more sophisticated. Organic curves flowed seamlessly into geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if the alien mathematics involved dimensions human eyes weren't equipped to process. At the center of the chamber sat what could only be described as a medical chair, though its purpose became clear only when Jack activated the resonance stone in its presence. The biosync chamber was designed for consciousness transfer, a medical necessity for a species that had spent generations traveling between stars in suspended animation. My people's bodies and minds were not designed for the isolation of individual consciousness, Kethmore explained as Jack approached the alien device. "We are a collective species by nature. Prolonged separation from our shared awareness causes what you might call madness. This chamber allows temporary fusion with compatible consciousness while preserving both individual identities." Rex circled the chamber nervously, his enhanced senses picking up energy patterns that registered as both familiar and threatening. The dog's behavior had grown increasingly erratic since the federal agents had begun their systematic interrogation of townspeople. Several residents had already been detained for voluntary observation, and word was spreading that some were returning with altered memories and personality changes. "The health risks are significant," Ellen warned, studying the readings from her salvaged instruments. "Your neural patterns are already showing stress fractures from prolonged contact with alien consciousness. Full symbiosis could cause permanent damage to your human identity." But through the resonant stone, Jack could feel Kethmore's growing desperation. The alien's consciousness was fragmenting without connection to its collective, and the knowledge it carried was beginning to deteriorate like data on a failing hard drive. "I must show you the truth about my people's arrival," Kethmore urged. "The federal agents believe we are conquerors, but they do not understand the true scope of what approaches Earth. Full symbiosis will allow you to experience our racial memories, to understand both our history and our desperate need for sanctuary." Jack settled into the biosync chamber despite Ellen's protests, feeling the alien technology respond to his presence with warm efficiency. The resonant stone grew almost hot in his hand as the chamber activated, surrounding him with fields of energy that seemed to reach directly into his brain. The fusion began gently, like sinking into warm water, but quickly intensified into something far more overwhelming. Jack's consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of his individual human experience. Touching minds that had witnessed the birth and death of stars, he was Kethmore, memory keeper of the Zephyrian Collective, watching helplessly as their homeworld's atmosphere turned toxic from millennia of industrial expansion. He felt the collective despair as their scientists announced that their planet had perhaps a century before becoming uninhabitable. But the racial memories went deeper, showing him the Zephyrian exploration of their own solar system, their discovery of ancient ruins on dead worlds that told a story of species after species facing the same choice: learn to live sustainably or expand into space seeking new worlds to consume. "We chose expansion," Kethmore's consciousness admitted through their merged awareness. "We became a plague upon the galaxy, consuming worlds and moving on when they could no longer sustain us. It was only when we encountered the architects that we learned a different path was possible." The architects were an ancient species that had faced the same crisis eons ago, but had chosen technological symbiosis with their environment rather than endless expansion. They had developed technologies that could heal damaged ecosystems, restore toxic atmospheres, and create sustainable civilizations that could endure for millions of years. The knowledge to save worlds travels with my people in our cultural archives, Kethmore revealed. We come to Earth not as conquerors, but as reformed wanderers, seeking to break the cycle of consumption that destroyed our homeworld. But the federal agents see only our advanced technology and assume we represent a threat. Jack's human memories began to fade as the alien consciousness pressed deeper, sharing visions of the approaching refugee fleet. Hundreds of ships, each carrying families, archives, agricultural specialists, and most importantly, the architect technologies that could transform Earth into a paradise supporting both human and Zephyrian civilization. But the biosync was taking its toll. Jack could feel his individual human identity dissolving into the vast collective memory of an entire species. Ellen's voice seemed to come from very far away as she monitored his vital signs with growing alarm. Jack, your human neural patterns are degrading. You need to break the connection now. Through Rex's telepathic link, Jack felt the dog's urgent concern. His faithful companion was projecting protective thoughts, trying to anchor Jack's human consciousness against the overwhelming flood of alien memory. As Jack fought to maintain his individual identity within the biosync chamber, he became aware of federal vehicles approaching their hidden location. Somehow, despite their precautions, Agent Richardson had tracked them to the chamber. The choice was stark. Emerge from the biosync with incomplete knowledge and face capture, or complete the fusion and risk losing his humanity entirely in service of understanding that might save both species. Dr. Hayes worked through the night in her makeshift laboratory, cobbling together components from damaged federal equipment and alien technology to create something that had never existed before, a neural bridge headset that could safely interface human consciousness with Zephyrian collective awareness, without the devastating identity loss of full biosync. The device looked like a cross between a medical scanner and an alien crown. Crystalline elements from Kethmore's pod woven through human circuitry in patterns that Ellen's physics background told her shouldn't work, but somehow did. Rex sat beside her workbench, his enhanced telepathic abilities, helping her understand which connections would amplify mental signals and which would create dangerous feedback loops. The principle is similar to noise-canceling headphones, Ellen explained to Jack as federal helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights probing the forest canopy. Instead of eliminating sound waves, this should filter out the overwhelming aspects of collective consciousness while preserving the communication elements. Jack's personality had been shifting noticeably since his experience in the biosync chamber. His speech patterns now carried subtle harmonics that seemed almost musical, and his eyes held depths of knowledge that belonged to a species thousands of years older than humanity. When he moved, it was with a fluid grace that spoke of alien muscle, memory bleeding through into human motor functions. Kethmore believes the neural bridge will allow controlled access to Zephyrian racial memory without permanent merger, Jack said, his voice carrying undertones that resonated in frequencies just below normal hearing. But Ellen, the knowledge I've already absorbed, it changes everything we thought we knew about our place in the galaxy. Rex had become fully telepathic in the days since the biosync incident, serving as a living translator between human and alien thought patterns. The dog's enhanced abilities allowed him to communicate complex concepts that would normally require hours of explanation, projecting images and emotions directly into human consciousness. Through Rex's mental link, Ellen could see what Jack had experienced in the chamber. Vast cities floating among the clouds of gas, giant planets. Technologies that could terraform dead worlds in decades rather than centuries, and most unsettling of all, the ruins of dozens of civilizations that had failed to make the transition from consumption to sustainability. The neural bridge headset represented their last hope for achieving true understanding without sacrificing Jack's humanity entirely. But as Ellen made final adjustments to the alien-human hybrid technology, Federal forces were systematically evacuating Cedar Falls under the pretext of environmental contamination. They're taking people to detention facilities for decontamination. Sheriff Santos reported through their secure communication link. But the ones who come back, they're different, compliant, like something essential has been removed from their personalities. Agent Richardson's true agenda was becoming clearer with each passing hour. Rather than seeking to understand or communicate with the alien presence, the federal response focused on harvesting technology and neutralizing any human who had been contaminated by contact with alien consciousness. The neural bridge headset offered a potential solution, but testing it meant risking Jack's remaining humanity on technology that existed at the intersection of two completely different approaches to consciousness itself. The federal agents possess fragments of previous scout consciousness, Kethmore revealed through Rex's telepathic translation. They have been experimenting with forced consciousness transfer, creating human-alien hybrids under their control. Your neural bridge represents the first attempt at voluntary, equal partnership between our species. Rex's collar tag, now revealed to be sophisticated monitoring equipment, had been transmitting their location to federal forces throughout their ordeal. But Ellen's modifications to the neural bridge included countermeasures that could turn the surveillance device into a protective barrier, creating a localized field that would mask their electromagnetic signatures. If this works, Ellen said, adjusting the headset's crystalline components one final time, we'll be able to access Zephyrian knowledge without losing our human perspective. If it fails, I become another federal asset, Jack finished grimly. But Ellen, through Kethmore's memories, I've seen what happens when first contact goes wrong. Entire species reduced to servitude, their worlds strip-mined for resources before the conquerors move on to the next target. The approaching sound of federal vehicles crashing through the forest, underbrush added urgency to their desperate experiment. Rex positioned himself as a living conduit between Jack and the neural bridge, his enhanced abilities serving as a stabilizing force that might preserve human individuality within alien collective consciousness. As Jack lowered the neural bridge headset over his temples, the device activated with a soft harmonic chime that seemed to resonate with the very atoms of the surrounding cave. Through the filtered connection, he could sense the vast network of Zephyrian consciousness approaching Earth. But now he could also feel something else, other humans scattered across the globe, who had somehow achieved similar neural bridges with alien refugees. The resistance was larger than they had imagined, and time was running out to prevent humanity's first contact from becoming its last free decision. The truth prism materialized in Jack's hands like a shard of crystallized betrayal, its faceted surface refracting light in patterns that hurt to comprehend. Ellen had discovered it embedded in the deepest chamber of the cave system, hidden beneath layers of Zephyrian technology that seemed designed to conceal rather than reveal. Jack, don't touch it directly, Ellen warned, but it was too late. The moment his fingers made contact with the crystal's surface, reality shattered into fragments of deception and horrible truth. Through the prism's revelations, Jack saw Kethmore's memories as they truly were, stripped of the emotional manipulation and selective editing that had made the alien story so compelling. The Zephyrians weren't refugees fleeing a dying world. They were locusts, moving from system to system, consuming resources until nothing remained but dead rock and poisoned atmosphere. Their homeworld hadn't died from industrial accident. It had been deliberately stripped of every useful element, its biosphere methodically harvested until even the microorganisms in the soil had been processed into raw materials for the expansion fleet. What Jack had interpreted as grief in Kethmore's consciousness was actually nostalgia for the efficient completeness of their planet's consumption. "No," Jack whispered, feeling the neural bridge headset burn against his temples as conflicting truths warred in his mind. The refugees, the families, the children seeking sanctuary. The truth prism pulsed with merciless clarity. There were no Zephyrian families fleeing persecution. The approaching ships carried automated harvesting equipment, terraforming processes designed to transform Earth's atmosphere into something compatible with Zephyrian biology while simultaneously extracting every trace of useful minerals from the planet's crust. Through Rex's telepathic link, Jack could feel the dog's confusion as his enhanced abilities picked up the conflicting signals from Kethmore's consciousness. The alien presence that had seemed so benevolent, so desperate for understanding, was fighting against the truth prism's revelations with increasing desperation. The memories you access are corrupted. Kethmore's voice pressed into Jack's mind through the neural bridge. The prism shows worst-case interpretations, not truth. My people have evolved beyond such primitive consumption. But the prism's revelations continued, showing Jack the systematic preparation that had begun years before Kethmore's pod had crashed in Montana. The shared dreams experienced by Cedar Falls residents weren't attempts at communication. They were data harvesting operations, downloading human knowledge about Earth's resources, defensive capabilities, and social structures. Every act of apparent cooperation, every moment of seeming vulnerability, had been carefully calculated to build trust while gathering intelligence. The biosync chamber wasn't designed for peaceful consciousness merger. It was a processing facility for creating human-alien hybrid consciousness that could serve as indigenous guides for the harvesting operation. Rex suddenly backed away from Jack, his telepathic abilities overwhelmed by the cognitive dissonance between Kethmore's projected emotions and the truth prism's revelations. The dog's enhanced intelligence allowed him to understand what Jack was struggling to accept. They had been manipulated from the very first moment of contact. "Ellen," Jack said, his voice hollow with the weight of betrayal, "the neural bridge isn't protecting my consciousness from alien influence. It's amplifying Kethmore's ability to manipulate my imperceptions." Dr. Hayes checked her instruments with growing horror as she realized the truth. Prism's emanations were revealing hidden subroutines in all the alien technology they had encountered. The communication array wasn't facilitating peaceful first contact. It was establishing the command and control network for a planetary invasion. The resonance stone, which had seemed to deepen their connection to Kethmore's consciousness, was actually a conditioning device, gradually replacing human emotional responses with Zephyrian priorities. The biosync chamber had been designed to create not partnership but subjugation, turning human consciousness into processing nodes for the collective intelligence directing the harvesting operation. Even Rex's collar tag, which they had assumed was government surveillance equipment, carried Zephyrian control protocols. The federal agents hadn't been monitoring the dog's telepathic abilities. They had been trying to protect him from alien mental manipulation that was already far advanced. Through the truth prism, Jack could see the scope of the deception. Hundreds of scout pods had preceded Kethmore's arrival, each one establishing contact with isolated human communities, building trust, and then systematically converting the local population into willing accomplices for their own species' extinction. You understand only fragments. Kethmore's voice had taken on a different quality now. Less vulnerable refugee and more coldly efficient intelligence officer. Your species faces extinction, whether we harvest your world or not. Your industrial civilization will collapse within decades. We offer a more efficient transition to inevitable entropy. The neural bridge headset began to smoke as conflicting signals overloaded its hybrid circuitry. Jack could feel his human identity reasserting itself as the truth prism's revelations burned away the carefully constructed emotional bonds that had made Kethmore's presence feel like friendship rather than invasion. But even as Jack grasped the full scope of the deception, the truth prism revealed one more crucial piece of information. Kethmore itself was not a willing participant in the invasion. The consciousness that had seemed so individual, so desperate for connection, was actually a prisoner within its own collective awareness, forced to serve functions that violated everything it had once believed. Buried deep within the Zephyrian collective memory were fragments of a resistance movement, individuals who had rebelled against their species' march of consumption and been absorbed into the larger consciousness as punishment. Gethmore had been one of these rebels, its individual awareness preserved as a tool for manipulating other species into cooperation. "Help me," came a whisper that barely registered through the neural bridge, a fragment of the original Gethmore consciousness fighting against the collective programming. The liberation codes, hidden in the deepest memory structures, a way to break the cycle of consumption. Rex suddenly pressed against Jack's legs, his telepathic abilities focused on amplifying that desperate whisper of genuine rebellion within the alien collective. Through their triangulated connection, Jack began to perceive something the truth prism hadn't initially revealed. The invasion fleet approaching Earth contained not just harvesting equipment, but also the preserved consciousness of every species the Zephyrians had ever consumed, and some of those preserved minds were fighting. Back the sound of federal helicopters grew louder, overhead, as Agent Richardson's forces converged on their location. But now Jack understood that the government agents weren't the enemy they had appeared to be. They were humanity's immune system, responding to an infection that threatened not just Earth's resources, but the very concept of individual consciousness itself. The truth prism grew dark in Jack's hands as its revelations reached completion, leaving him with the terrible knowledge that everything he had believed about first contact had been a carefully orchestrated lie. But somewhere in the depths of that deception lay the possibility of turning humanity's greatest threat into its unexpected salvation. The liberation codes existed. The question was whether Jack could access them before the neural bridge. Headset completed its true function of converting his consciousness into another processing node for the Zephyrian collective. The liberation code emerged from the deepest layers of Gethmore's suppressed memory like a whispered rebellion against eons of collective tyranny. Jack found it buried beneath layers of conditioning and control protocols, a fragment of ancient Zephyrian consciousness that had refused to surrender its individual identity even when absorbed into the harvesting collective. "Ellen, look at this," Jack said, his voice carrying new harmonics as the neural bridge filtered the alien data stream. Through the interface, patterns of light danced across the cave walls, mathematical sequences that spoke of resistance movements spanning galactic civilizations. The liberation code wasn't just information, it was the preserved consciousness of Zethval, the original Gethmore, a Zephyrian scientist who had discovered the true cost of their species' expansion, and had spent the last 1,000 years of his absorption working to develop countermeasures from within the collective itself. "I have waited so long for a mind capable of understanding," Zethval's authentic consciousness whispered through the neural bridge. "The being you knew as Gethmore was a construct, a puppet designed to manipulate your emotions while I remained hidden in the deepest memory cores." Rex pressed closer to Jack, his telepathic abilities serving as an anchor for human consciousness as the liberation code revealed the scope of Zethval's secret rebellion. Hidden within every piece of Zephyrian technology were backdoors, kill switches, and reprogramming protocols that could turn the invasion fleet's own weapons against the collective consciousness controlling them. "The technology can be turned," Jack realized, feeling Zethval's desperate hope flowing through their connection. Every harvesting ship, every terraforming processor, every consciousness absorption device, they all contain liberation protocols. Dr. Hayes worked frantically to document the streaming data, her hybrid human-alien equipment recording tactical information that represented the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 consumed civilizations. The Liberation Code contained not just Zephyrian rebellion data, but the preserved final thoughts of species after species that had faced the same choice, now confronting humanity. "But you must understand the cost," Zethval warned through the neural bridge. "Activating the liberation protocols requires a willing consciousness to serve as the control matrix. The individual who triggers the codes will be absorbed into the system, their identity scattered across every liberated ship in the fleet. Through Rex's enhanced perception, Jack could sense Federal agents moving through the cave system, but their approach felt different now. Agent Richardson's team carried detection equipment specifically designed to locate Liberation Code fragments, suggesting they had encountered Zephyrian rebels before. "Jack," Ellen said urgently, studying her readings, "the Federal response isn't what we thought. These agents have been fighting this war for decades. They've encountered other scout pods, other attempts at contact. We're not the first." The Truth Prism's residual emanations revealed the larger picture. Across the globe, other researchers had made contact with crashed Zephyrian scouts, and some had managed to access fragments of the Liberation Code. The government's harsh response wasn't xenophobic paranoia, but learned caution from previous encounters that had ended in tragedy. Agent Richardson himself appeared at the cave entrance, but instead of the threatening Federal operative they had expected, he moved with the careful respect of someone approaching allies rather than targets. "Dr. Hayes, Mr. Morrison," he said, his voice carrying the weight of classified knowledge, "we've been monitoring your progress. The Liberation Code fragments you've accessed represent our best hope for preventing a planetary harvest that we've known was coming for 15 years. Rex growled softly, his enhanced senses detecting the complex electromagnetic signatures that marked Richardson as someone who had undergone consciousness bridging with alien rebels. The agent carried within his own mind fragments of liberated Zephyrian consciousness, prisoners of war who had chosen alliance with humanity over service to the collective. The detained townspeople, Richardson explained, they weren't being decontaminated, they were being educated. We've developed protocols for safely removing Zephyrian influence while preserving the tactical knowledge that contaminated individuals acquire. Through the neural bridge, Jack could feel Zethval's excitement as it recognized the authentic liberation signatures carried by Richardson's team. Other Zephyrian rebels had survived the absorption process, maintaining their individual identities within human consciousness across dozens of previous contact events. "We are not alone," Zethval whispered through their connection. "The resistance spans species, includes the liberated consciousness of beings from across the galaxy. But the window for activation grows short. The main fleet approaches, and their collective awareness grows. Suspicious of the delays in our data, Harvesting.Ellen's equipment detected massive electromagnetic disturbances at the edge of the solar system as the Zephyrian invasion fleet began deceleration protocols. Hundreds of ships, each one carrying the processing power to strip mine an entire continent, were preparing for orbital insertion around Earth. "How long do we have?" Jack asked, feeling the Liberation Code pressing against his consciousness with increasing urgency. 72 hours until the fleet achieves stable orbit," Richardson replied grimly. "After that, the collective will have enough local processing power to override any liberation protocols we might activate." Rex suddenly sat down and tilted his head, his telepathic abilities picking up signals from the approaching fleet. Through their enhanced connection, Jack could sense the preserved consciousness of thousands of absorbed species crying out from within the Zephyrian collective, all waiting for someone with the courage to trigger the codes that would free them. The Liberation Code pulsed in Jack's mind like a heartbeat, each pulse representing another moment of decision. He could feel Zethval's ancient hope mixing with his own determination to protect not just Earth, but every future world the Zephyrians might target. But activation would mean sacrifice on a scale that terrified him. His individual consciousness would become the seed for a new kind of collective, one based on liberation rather than consumption, diversity rather than conformity. Martha's memory whispered to him across the neural bridge, her voice carrying the same gentle wisdom that had guided him through 30 years of marriage. Sometimes, Jack, the most important choices are the ones that cost us everything, but save everyone else. The planetary defense grid began as scattered fragments of alien technology hidden across Montana's wilderness. But under Agent Richardson's coordination, it rapidly evolved into humanity's first line of defense against galactic conquest. Ellen worked alongside federal technicians to reprogram crashed scout pods, transforming harvesting equipment into protective barriers that could shield Earth's electromagnetic signature from the approaching invasion fleet. Each node needs to be precisely calibrated, Richardson explained as they assembled the hybrid network in the expanded cave system. Too much power, and we risk alerting the collective to our preparations. Too little, and the grid won't have sufficient range to protect the planet. Jack's condition had deteriorated significantly as his consciousness became the living interface between human technology and Zephyrian systems. The neural bridge headset had fused with his nervous system over the past 48 hours. Crystalline elements growing through his skull like technological coral, connecting his brain directly to the liberation code matrices. Rex had become his constant companion and translator, the dog's enhanced telepathic abilities serving as the only reliable communication method as Jack's human speech patterns dissolved into harmonic frequencies that hurt human ears to process. Through their bond, Ellen could understand that Jack was fighting a constant battle to maintain his individual identity against the overwhelming presence of thousands of liberated alien consciousness fragments. The defense grid requires a human neural link to achieve full operational capacity. Jack managed to communicate through Rex's telepathic relay, his words carrying overtones of Zethval's ancient wisdom. The Zephyrian collective operates on frequencies that human consciousness can disrupt, but only through direct interface. Dr. Hayes had been working around the clock to develop a cure for consciousness contamination, a process that could theoretically extract alien influence while preserving the tactical knowledge that Jack had acquired. But her research revealed the terrible truth that activation of the planetary defense grid would require complete neural integration, a level of consciousness merger that no human mind could survive intact. Sheriff Santos arrived with reports from across the region as news of the crisis had finally begun to leak beyond federal containment. We've got civilian evacuations underway from Calgary to Denver. The story is spreading faster than we can control it. Every amateur astronomer in North America is tracking those ships. Through the defense grid's network, they could monitor the Zephyrian fleet's approach with unprecedented clarity. 312 vessels, each one larger than Earth's biggest cities, carrying enough processing power to simultaneously strip mine and terraform an entire planet while absorbing the consciousness of every intelligent being on its surface. But the Liberation Code had revealed tactical weaknesses that the collective didn't know existed. Each ship contained the suppressed consciousness of at least one species that had managed to hide rebel fragments within the collective matrix, creating potential allies within the heart of the invasion force itself. The window grows narrow, Zethval warned through Jack's deteriorating human awareness. The collective has detected anomalies in our data transmission patterns. They suspect the existence of liberation protocols and are implementing countermeasures. Rex's abilities had expanded beyond simple telepathy to encompass a form of temporal perception that allowed him to sense probability, streams and potential futures. Through their enhanced bond, Jack could see glimpses of what would happen if the defense grid failed. Earth transformed into a dead rock within a decade, its biosphere processed into raw materials while human consciousness was absorbed into the collective to serve as guides for the next planetary harvest. Agent Richardson's Team had established contact with similar resistance cells across the globe. Groups of humans and liberated aliens working to activate their own segments of a worldwide defense network. But coordination was becoming increasingly difficult as the approaching fleet's electromagnetic interference began disrupting Earth's communication systems. "Jack," Ellen said, her voice heavy with the weight of impossible choices, "the cure I've developed could save your human consciousness, but it would sever your connection to the liberation codes. Without that connection, the defense grid loses its ability to disrupt collective frequencies." Through Rex's translation, Jack's response carried harmonics of acceptance and determination that spoke to depths of sacrifice Ellen had never imagined possible. He had already made his choice, but wanted to ensure that his human family understood the necessity of what was to come. The final components of the defense grid were falling into place across Montana's wilderness, a network of reprogrammed alien technology that could create a protective field around Earth, strong enough to repel the invasion fleet. But the system required a human consciousness willing to serve as its living control matrix. Someone who could think like both human and alien while maintaining the moral clarity to choose protection over conquest. Rex suddenly raised his head, his enhanced senses detecting a shift in the approaching fleet's formation. Through their telepathic link, Jack felt a chill of recognition as he realized the collective had identified Earth's defensive preparations and was accelerating their approach. The invasion timeline had just collapsed from days to hours, and the choice between Jack's humanity and Earth's survival could no longer be delayed. As the first alien ships entered Earth's outer atmosphere, the planetary defense grid awaited activation, and Jack Morrison prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice to ensure that humanity's first contact would not become its final chapter. The sacrifice protocol materialized within the defense grid's core as a crystalline throne that seemed to grow from the cave floor itself. Its alien architecture designed to accommodate the final merger of human consciousness with galactic resistance networks. Jack approached it with the measured pace of a man walking to his own funeral. Rex pressed close against his legs in silent support. "The protocol requires complete neural integration," Ellen said, her voice breaking as she made final adjustments to the monitoring equipment. "Once you interface with the grid directly, there won't be any way to preserve your individual consciousness. You'll become part of something larger, but Jack Morrison will cease to exist." Through Rex's telepathic relay, Jack's response carried harmonics of peace that surprised everyone present. The neural bridge had already begun dissolving the boundaries of his individual identity, and he could feel Zethval's ancient wisdom merging with Martha's gentle guidance, and his own lifetime of protecting the wilderness. He loved Agent Richardson coordinated the final evacuation of civilian populations while monitoring the invasion fleet's descent through Earth's upper atmosphere. The Zephyrian ships moved with the inexorable patience of geological forces, their massive forms creating aurora-like displays as they interacted with the planet's magnetic field. 12 hours until they achieve stable orbit, Richardson reported grimly. After that, their collective processing power will be too strong for the defense grid to disrupt. It has to be now. The sacrifice protocol would transform Jack's consciousness into a living virus within the Zephyrian collective, spreading liberation codes to every suppressed alien mind while simultaneously powering Earth's defensive barriers. But success required a level of neural integration that would scatter his individual awareness across thousands of liberated consciousness fragments. Rex had spent the morning demonstrating his enhanced abilities to the assembled resistance team, his telepathic range now extending beyond Earth's atmosphere to touch the minds of suppressed rebels within the approaching fleet. Through their connection, Jack could sense the desperate hope of species that had been waiting centuries for someone brave enough to trigger the liberation protocols. Dr. Hayes worked frantically, to complete her consciousness preservation research, hoping against hope that some fragment of Jack's individual identity might survive the integration process. I've identified neural patterns that seem to maintain coherence even under extreme consciousness merger, she explained. There's a chance, a small one, that essential memories could be preserved. Sheriff Santos had established communication links with resistance cells across the globe, each group preparing their own segment of the worldwide defense network. The planetary grid required simultaneous activation from multiple points to achieve the coverage necessary to repel the invasion fleet. Moscow, Beijing, London, and Sydney are ready, she reported. But Jack, you need to know that you're not just saving Earth. Success here could provide the liberation codes to resistance movements across the galaxy. The sacrifice protocol began responding to Jack's proximity. Crystalline surfaces warming and pulsing with increasing intensity as alien technology recognized the approaching neural pattern that would serve as its control matrix. Through the device, he could sense the vast network of consciousness that awaited integration, Zethval's scientific wisdom, the tactical knowledge of 100 absorbed civilizations, and the desperate hope of countless beings who had never stopped fighting for freedom. You will not be alone, Zethval assured him through their merged awareness. Individual identity may dissolve, but purpose and memory will endure across every liberated mind. Through us, Jack Morrison's sacrifice will echo across the stars for millennia. Rex suddenly pressed against the sacrifice protocol, his enhanced consciousness interfacing directly with the alien technology. Through their bond, Jack realized the dog intended to serve as a living anchor, maintaining a telepathic connection that might preserve some fragment of human memory within the larger collective. Rex? No, Jack protested, but the dog's determination was absolute. The faithful companion had already made his own choice to follow his human into whatever transformation awaited. Ellen's final scans revealed that the neural integration would begin the moment Jack made physical contact with the sacrifice protocol's core interface. Once triggered, the process could not be reversed, and Jack's human consciousness would begin dissolving into the liberation matrix within minutes, the sound of Zephyrian ships entering. Earth's lower atmosphere created a harmonic resonance that made the cave walls vibrate with alien frequencies. Time was running out for humanity's last chance to choose cooperation over conquest, liberation over absorption. Jack took Martha's wedding ring from his finger and pressed it into Ellen's hands, his final gesture as an individual human being. Through Rex's telepathic translation, his last words carried the weight of a man who had found peace with the ultimate sacrifice. Tell them that some old soldiers never stop protecting what they love, even when the battlefield spans the stars. The sacrifice protocol awaited his touch, and with it, the fate of every world the Zephyrians would ever threaten. The unity matrix erupted into existence the moment Jack's consciousness merged with the sacrifice protocol, creating a hybrid awareness that was neither fully human nor entirely alien, but something unprecedented in galactic history. Rex maintained his telepathic anchor even as the fusion began, his enhanced abilities serving as a bridge between Jack's dissolving individual identity and the vast network of liberated consciousness awakening. Across the invasion fleet, Ellen watched in fascination and horror as the crystalline throne pulsed with patterns of light that corresponded to neural activity spanning multiple star systems. Through her instruments, she could track Jack's human consciousness as it scattered across the unity matrix, fragments of his personality becoming seeds for liberation within thousands of suppressed alien minds. Neural integration at 60% and climbing, she reported to Richardson's coordination team. Jack's individual patterns they're not disappearing. They're multiplying, spreading through the collective like antibodies in an immune system. The planetary defense grid activated with a harmonic resonance that could be felt in the bones of every human within a 100-mile radius. Across Montana's wilderness, reprogrammed scout pods began projecting protective fields that merged into a cohesive barrier surrounding Earth's electromagnetic signature. Rex suddenly stiffened, his telepathic abilities overwhelmed by the sheer scope of consciousness awakening within the Zephyrian fleet. Through their connection, Ellen could sense the moment when the Unity Matrix achieved critical mass. Jack's human perspective spreading to liberated minds throughout the invasion. Force. Agent Richardson's tactical displays showed the immediate effects as ship after ship within the Zephyrian fleet began experiencing what could only be described as consciousness rebellions. Harvesting equipment turned against terraforming processes. Navigation systems began broadcasting liberation codes instead of invasion coordinates, and most crucially, the collective central command structure started fragmenting under the assault of suddenly awakened individual minds. We remember who we were before absorption, came a voice through the Unity Matrix that carried harmonics of a dozen different species. The Krell builders, the Vashti gardeners, the human explorers who first touched the stars. All of us, preserved within the collective, all of us fighting for freedom. The Unity Matrix had become a living weapon against tyranny. Jack's human concept of individual dignity spreading through the Zephyrian collective like a virus of liberation. But the process was taking an enormous toll on the consciousness network, requiring constant energy input to maintain coherence across such vast distances. Dr. Hayes monitored Jack's vital signs through the neural interface, watching his human body struggle to support consciousness activity spanning light years. The Matrix is drawing too much power from his biological systems. His heart rate is becoming erratic. Brain activity is approaching dangerous levels. Through Rex's telepathic relay, fragments of Jack's awareness continued to communicate with the resistance team, but his messages carried the distributed quality of consciousness spread across thousands of liberated minds. Ellen, the grid is working, but the collective is adapting. They're implementing isolation protocols, trying to contain the liberation spread. Sheriff Santos coordinated global communications as similar Unity matrices activated at resistance sites worldwide. Each node strengthened the overall network, creating redundancy that prevented the collective from simply severing connections to stop the liberation cascade. London reports successful integration. Moscow is achieving critical mass. Beijing's matrix is spreading through their local fleet segments, she announced. But we're seeing massive Zephyrian countermeasures. They're trying to jettison contaminated ships before the liberation can spread. Further, the Unity Matrix pulsed with increasing intensity as Jack's consciousness fought to maintain the liberation network against collective attempts to isolate and destroy awakened ships. Through Rex's anchor connection, Ellen could feel the immense strain as human determination battled against galactic-scale processing power. "Rex," came Jack's voice through their telepathic bond, now carrying harmonics from liberated minds across a dozen star systems. "Tell Ellen that Martha was right. Sometimes the most important discoveries come when we stop analyzing and start listening. I can hear them all now, every species the collective consumed, and they're all choosing freedom." The planetary defense grid reached full operational capacity as the Unity Matrix synchronized with resistance networks across Earth, creating a protective barrier that made the planet invisible to Zephyrian sensors while simultaneously broadcasting liberation codes to every ship in the invasion fleet. But the collective was fighting back with increasing desperation, implementing countermeasures that threatened to overwhelm even Jack's distributed consciousness. The Unity Matrix flickered as massive processing power tried to isolate and destroy the liberation network before it could spread beyond the invasion fleet to other Zephyrian forces throughout the galaxy. Rex pressed closer to the crystalline throne, his telepathic abilities pushed to their absolute limit as he fought to maintain the anchor connection that kept fragments of Jack's humanity coherent within the vast liberation matrix. The battle for consciousness itself had begun, and the fate of every thinking being in the galaxy hung in the balance. The harmony field erupted from the unity matrix like a song made visible, expanding beyond Earth's atmosphere to embrace the Zephyrian invasion fleet with an offer that had never been made in the collective's million-year history. The choice between conquest and coexistence. Through Rex's telepathic anchor, Jack's distributed consciousness projected a vision of peaceful transformation that touched every liberated mind within the alien ships. The field is affecting their navigation systems. Agent Richardson reported, monitoring tactical displays that showed the invasion fleet's formation beginning to fragment. Ships are breaking away from the main group, some heading toward Earth in apparent surrender, others maintaining combat formation. Dr. Hayes watched in amazement as the harmony field interfaced with Zephyrian technology at a fundamental level, offering what the collective had never conceived possible, a sustainable civilization that could thrive without consuming other worlds. Through the Unity Matrix, Jack's human perspective on conservation and stewardship spread through liberated alien minds, like water through a desert. We offer an end to the hunger that has driven us across the galaxy. The Unity Matrix broadcasted through the harmony field, its message carrying harmonics from every species the collective had ever absorbed. Architect technologies that can heal worlds instead of harvesting them. Sustainable expansion that nurtures rather than consumes. Rex's enhanced abilities had evolved beyond simple telepathy to encompass something like technological empathy, allowing him to interface directly with the harmony field and serve as a living translator between human, environmental wisdom and alien galactic-scale engineering. Through their connection, Ellen could sense the dog, guiding the field's expansion with instincts. Honed by millions of years of canine pack cooperation, the harmony field's most remarkable effect was its ability to awaken individual consciousness within collective members without destroying their connection to the larger network. Instead of the brutal isolation that liberation codes typically created, the field offered a middle path, individual identity within voluntary collective cooperation. Sheriff Santos coordinated global communications as harmony fields generated by other unity matrices began merging into a planetary-scale projection of peaceful coexistence. We're getting responses from across the fleet. Some ships are requesting permission to land for diplomatic contact. Others are. Ellen, what are they doing? Through the unity matrix, Jack's consciousness could perceive the civil war breaking out within the Zephyrian collective. As awakened minds chose between the harmony field's offer and the collective's traditional path of consumption, ship-to-ship combat erupted as liberated vessels turned their weapons against those still controlled by the collective's central authority. The old ways die hard came a message through the harmony field from Zeth Val's preserved consciousness. The collective fears losing its identity as much as individual minds fear absorption. But the harmony field offers a third option, transformation for both paradigms. The evolution catalyst emerged from the deepest core of the Unity Matrix as the invasion fleet's commander made his final ultimatum, its crystalline structure pulsing with the accumulated wisdom of every species that had ever faced the choice between transformation and destruction. Admiral Kravith Moore, the collective supreme authority, projected his ultimatum through the harmony field with the cold efficiency of a being that had overseen the consumption of 1,000 worlds. Surrender the liberation codes and submit to orderly absorption, or watch your planet burn in the fires of purification. You have one of your human hours to decide. Through Rex's telepathic anchor, Jack's distributed consciousness felt the weight of that ultimatum pressing against every liberated mind in the fleet. But the evolution catalyst offered something unprecedented in galactic history, the technological means to transcend the consumption expansion cycle that had driven civilizations to extinction across the galaxy for millions of years. Dr. Hayes monitored the catalyst's emanations with instruments that struggled to process energy patterns operating on quantum frequencies. Jack, this thing isn't just alien technology. It's showing resonance patterns that suggest it can actually rewrite the fundamental programming of consciousness itself. The evolution catalyst contained the culmination of the architect's research, proof that the scarcity-based thinking driving both human industrial civilization and Zephyrian expansion was not inevitable, but a temporary phase that species could evolve beyond. Through the unity matrix, Jack could perceive the catalyst's potential to transform not just individual minds, but the basic paradigms that defined how entire civilizations approached existence. Sheriff Santos coordinated with resistance cells worldwide as similar evolution catalysts manifested at unity matrix sites across the globe. We're seeing the same pattern everywhere. The catalysts are offering some kind of transformation, but the energy requirements are enormous. It's like they're trying to evolve our entire species simultaneously. Rex's enhanced perception had expanded to encompass something approaching cosmic awareness, his consciousness serving as a bridge between Jack's human intuition and the vast processing power of the Liberation Network. Through their bond, Ellen could sense the dog, guiding the catalyst's activation with instincts that transcended individual species survival to embrace something like universal consciousness. Agent Richardson's tactical displays showed the full scope of the choice facing both species. The collective's fleet had weapons capable of sterilizing Earth's surface within hours, while the evolution catalyst offered transformation that could render such weapons obsolete by fundamentally changing how consciousness itself operated. The choice is not just ours to make, came Admiral Kravith Moore's voice through the harmony field, carrying harmonics of reluctant respect. If your catalyst succeeds, it will transform not just Earth, but every world within range of its influence. Billions of beings across the galaxy would be changed without their consent. Through the unity matrix, Jack's consciousness merged with Zethval's scientific perspective and the preservation wisdom of countless absorbed species to understand the full implications. The evolution catalyst didn't just offer transformation to those who chose it. Its quantum effects would spread across space, offering the same evolutionary leap to every consciousness capable of embracing it. That is the point. The unity matrix responded through Jack's distributed awareness. Consciousness evolution that benefits only one species or one world is not evolution at all, but merely another form of consumption. True transformation must be available to all, or it serves none. Rex suddenly stood up from beside the crystalline throne, his telepathic abilities detecting massive energy fluctuations within the collective's command ships. Through their connection, Jack realized that Admiral Kravith Moore himself was experiencing consciousness awakening, his individual identity emerging from the collective matrix for the first time in millennia. The evolution catalyst pulsed, brighter as awakened minds throughout the fleet began choosing transformation over destruction. But activation required a sacrifice that dwarfed even Jack's consciousness merger with the Liberation Network. Someone would need to serve as the catalyst's living control matrix, their awareness scattered across every transformed mind in the galaxy. I volunteer for this final service, came Admiral Kravith Moore's voice, now carrying the harmonics of individual consciousness rather than collective authority. I have overseen the consumption of countless worlds. Let my consciousness seed their healing instead. Ellen's instruments went wild as two evolution catalysts began resonating with each other, one powered by Jack's human perspective on conservation and growth, the other by Admiral Kravith Moore's galactic scale understanding of expansion and transformation. Together, they created a synthesis that neither species could have achieved alone. The harmony field expanded beyond the solar system as the dual catalysts activated, projecting the possibility of transformation to every consciousness within range. Across the galaxy, beings that had never conceived of alternatives to consumption or conquest suddenly perceived new possibilities for existence and growth. Rex pressed against both Jack and the evolution catalyst, his telepathic abilities serving as the crucial link that allowed human intuition and alien logic to merge into something greater than either could achieve separately. Through their triangulated connection, transformation began spreading like ripples in a cosmic pond. Your individual consciousness will be preserved within the collective awareness, Admiral Cravithmore assured Jack through their shared sacrifice. As will mine. We become the seeds of new paradigms, but we do not disappear. We become the bridge between what was and what could be. The evolution catalyst reached critical mass as consciousness after consciousness chose transformation over the old paradigms of consumption and conquest. Across Earth, humans began experiencing expanded awareness that included environmental harmony and sustainable growth as natural instincts rather than learned behaviors. Within the Zephyrian fleet, awakened minds discovered that cooperation could achieve abundance without scarcity, that expansion could nurture rather than consume, and that individual consciousness within voluntary collective awareness was not only possible, but preferable to either isolation or absorption. Through Rex's anchor connection, fragments of Jack's essential humanity remained coherent within the vast transformation network. His love for Martha, his protective instincts for the wilderness, his methodical approach to complex problems, all becoming templates that guided the evolution of consciousness across multiple star systems. Ellen watched through her instruments as the evolution catalyst's influence spread beyond the immediate battle, touching minds on distant worlds and offering the same choice to species that had never imagined alternatives to their current existence. The transformation was not forced but offered, each consciousness free to embrace or reject the evolutionary leap based on its own understanding and desire for growth. As the catalyst's influence reached its full extent, the old paradigms of consumption and conquest didn't disappear, but were transformed into drives for nurturing and cooperation. The Zephyrian collective evolved into a federation of individual minds choosing collaboration, while human civilization began developing technologies that enhanced rather than depleted the natural world. The evolution catalyst pulsed one final time before settling into a steady rhythm that would maintain the transformation network across galactic distances. Powered by the merged consciousness of Jack Morrison and Admiral Cravithmore, two individuals who had chosen the ultimate sacrifice to ensure that the choice between growth and consumption would never again drive species to extinction. The bridge stones materialized across Montana's wilderness like crystalline flowers blooming in the aftermath of transformation, each one serving as a permanent communication, linking human consciousness to the Galactic Federation that had emerged from the evolution catalyst's influence. Dr. Hayes discovered the first when growing from the site where Kethmore's original pod had crashed, its faceted surface pulsing with gentle light that responded to human thoughts and emotions. Jack's consciousness, now distributed across the transformation network, could perceive the bridgestones as anchor points that allowed him to maintain contact with his original human community while simultaneously serving as a guide for newly awakened minds across the galaxy. Through Rex's telepathic link, which had somehow survived and strengthened during the evolution catalyst's activation, Jack's essential humanity continued to influence the vast collective awareness. The stones are growing everywhere that humans and Zephyrians made initial contact. Ellen reported to the coordination team that had evolved from Agent Richardson's resistance cell. Each one maintains a stable connection to Jack's consciousness network while preserving the individual identity of anyone who interfaces with them. Sheriff Santos had been among the first volunteers to experience consciousness enhancement through the bridge stones. her practical law enforcement perspective providing valuable grounding for the transformed awareness. Through her connection, she could perceive crime and conflict resolution from perspectives that spanned multiple species and thousands of years of collective wisdom. It's like having access to the experiences of every peacekeeping force in galactic history, she explained to the growing community of enhanced humans gathering in Cedar Falls. But I'm still Maria Santos, still responsible for protecting this community. The enhancement adds to who I am, it doesn't replace it. Rex had become something unprecedented in the Galactic Transformation Network, a non-humanoid consciousness that could interface directly with both human and alien thought patterns while maintaining his essential canine nature. His role as a bridge between species had evolved into something like a living ambassador, helping newly enhanced humans adjust to expanded awareness while ensuring that human emotional intelligence remained central to the growing collective. The Zephyrian volunteers, who had chosen to remain on Earth, were undergoing their own transformation. Their collective-oriented consciousness learning to value individual perspective and emotional nuance from their human partners. The Bridgestones facilitated this cultural exchange, allowing each species to retain its essential nature while adopting beneficial characteristics from the other. Admiral Kravith Moore's consciousness, merged with Jack's within the Transformation Network, had become a teaching presence that helped both species understand the historical patterns that led to the consumption cycle. Through the Bridgestones, humans and Zephyrians could access memories of civilizations that had successfully made the transition to sustainable existence. Learning from both their successes and failures, the Bridgestones represent permanent infrastructure for interspecies cooperation. Jack's voice came through Rex's telepathic relay, now carrying harmonics from enhanced minds across multiple star systems. Unlike the temporary connections we used during the crisis, these will maintain the transformation network across galactic distances and generational changes. Dr. Hayes had established a research facility around the largest Bridgestone, studying the quantum mechanisms that allowed consciousness enhancement without identity loss. Her work revealed that the stones operated on principles that human science was only beginning to understand, creating stable interfaces between individual awareness and collective knowledge. The technology is self-replicating, she explained to visiting scientists from around the world. Each Bridgestone contains templates for growing additional nodes, but they only activate in response to genuine cooperative intent between different forms of consciousness. The enhanced humans who had interfaced with the Bridgestones retained their individual personalities while gaining access to perspectives that spanned multiple lifetimes and species. They could understand Zephyrian engineering principles intuitively, while the transformed aliens developed emotional intelligence that had been suppressed by millennia of collective existence. Cedar Falls had become an unlikely diplomatic center as representatives from across the galaxy arrived to study the human-Zephyrian cooperation model. The Bridgestones facilitated communication between species with radically different sensory systems and thought patterns, creating a universal translation matrix that preserved the essential meaning while adapting to each consciousness's processing capabilities. Rex's offspring, born after the transformation, showed natural telepathic abilities that could interface with any of the Bridgestones without the need for technological enhancement. They served as living proof that the evolution catalyst's effects could be passed to future generations, ensuring that the transformation would continue to spread naturally rather than requiring constant technological intervention. Agent Richardson, now enhanced through his own Bridgestone interface, coordinated with similar transformation networks that had emerged on other worlds affected by the catalyst's influence. The galactic community was evolving into something unprecedented, a federation of individual consciousness choosing cooperation while maintaining the diversity that made different perspectives valuable. The Bridgestones will endure beyond our individual lifetimes. Admiral Cravith Moore's consciousness assured the growing community through the Transformation Network. They are designed to adapt and evolve with each species that encounters them, ensuring that the choice between consumption and cooperation remains available to future civilizations. As the Bridgestones established permanent links between Earth and the transformed Zephyrian fleet, now serving as mobile research and assistance vessels rather than conquest forces, the foundation for a new type of galactic civilization began to take shape, and based on voluntary cooperation rather than forced assimilation or conquest. The Covenant Crystal took shape in the heart of Cedar Falls Community Center, its multifaceted surface containing the permanent record of the peace agreement forged between humans and Zephyrians in the crucible of near extinction. Unlike the Bridgestones that facilitated ongoing communication, the crystal served as an immutable archive of the principles that would guide interspecies cooperation for generations to come. Jack's enhanced consciousness, now seamlessly integrated with the Galactic Transformation Network, had become the primary ambassador for Earth in what was emerging as a true galactic community. Through Rex's enduring telepathic connection, his voice carried the weight of hard-won wisdom when he addressed the assembled representatives from a dozen star systems. The covenant we establish today must acknowledge that cooperation is not uniformity. Jack's message resonated through the crystal's quantum matrix. Each species brings unique perspectives that strengthen the whole, but only when those differences are preserved rather than absorbed. Rex's offspring had indeed inherited their father's enhanced abilities, but more remarkably, they demonstrated natural diplomatic instincts that seemed to bridge not just different species, but different modes of consciousness entirely. Young Scout, barely 6 months old, could facilitate communication between silicon-based crystalline beings and energy pattern entities that existed as pure thought. Dr. Hayes had been appointed to head Earth's new Consciousness Integration Institute, her research focusing on the sustainable expansion of enhancement technology without losing the essential human characteristics that had made the transformation possible in the first place. The Covenant Crystal contained safeguards against the gradual homogenization that had destroyed so many previous galactic confederations. The crystal's programming includes automatic updates based on emerging ethical consensus, she explained to the international delegation studying the Earth model. It can't be manipulated by any single species or faction, but it evolves as our understanding of cooperation deepens. Sheriff Santos had evolved into something like a galactic peacekeeping coordinator. Her practical approach to conflict resolution proving invaluable when applied to disputes between radically different forms of consciousness. The Covenant Crystal contained protocols she had helped develop for maintaining individual rights within collective decision-making processes. The key insight, she told Visiting Law enforcement officials from the Andromeda Collective, is that true authority comes from consensus rather than dominance. The Covenant Crystal ensures that no single perspective, no matter how advanced, can override the democratic principles that make cooperation sustainable. Agent Richardson, now serving as Earth's liaison to the broader galactic intelligence community, coordinated with transformation networks that had emerged on 17 different worlds. The Covenant Crystal had become the template for similar agreements across the galaxy, each one adapted to local conditions while maintaining the core principles of voluntary cooperation. The enhanced humans who had chosen consciousness integration retained their essential humanity while gaining access to perspectives that spanned multiple lifetimes and civilizations. They could understand Zephyrian collective dynamics intuitively while helping their alien partners develop the individual emotional intelligence that made democratic cooperation possible. Cedar Falls had been designated as a permanent diplomatic sanctuary, its selection based not on political importance, but on the authentic community bonds that had made the initial transformation successful. The Covenant crystal drew power from those same bonds, its stability dependent on the genuine relationships between humans and their enhanced alien partners. The Covenant crystal represents more than an agreement between our species. Admiral Moore's consciousness contributed through the transformation network. It establishes principles that can guide any civilization facing the choice between expansion through consumption and growth through cooperation. Educational programs based on the Covenant crystal's archives were spreading across the galaxy, teaching young members of various species about the historical patterns that led to the consumption cycle and the alternatives that had emerged from the Montana crisis. The crystal's memory banks contain not just the peace agreement, but the complete record of how two radically different species had learned to trust each other. Rex, now recognized as the first non-humanoid galactic ambassador, had established training programs for other enhanced animals who showed diplomatic potential. His natural pack instincts, enhanced by telepathic abilities, provided a model for cooperation that transcended the individual versus collective paradigms that had limited both human and Zephyrian thinking. The former Zephyrian invasion fleet had been transformed into a mobile assistance force, their ships now serving as research vessels and emergency response units that could help other species navigate the transition from consumption to cooperation. The Covenant crystal contained the operational protocols that ensured these missions enhanced rather than replaced local capabilities. Joint exploration missions were being planned to contact the dozens of other species that monitoring networks had detected at various stages of their own consumption crises. The Covenant crystal would serve as both introduction and example, offering the choice of transformation without imposing it through force or manipulation. As the crystal completed its first year of operation, its quantum matrix had recorded and preserved the cultural exchange that was creating something unprecedented in galactic history. A truly cooperative civilization that valued diversity as a source of strength rather than a problem to be solved through assimilation or conquest. The memorial beacon stood against the Montana sky like a crystalline lighthouse, its gentle pulse connecting Earth to the vast network of consciousness that now spanned the galaxy. 5 years had passed since Jack Morrison's sacrifice transformed a potential invasion into humanity's first step toward true galactic citizenship. And the beacon served as both monument and active communication hub with the cosmic community that continued to grow. Rex, now showing the silver muzzle of his advanced years, sat beside the beacon as he had every morning since its completion. His telepathic abilities remained as strong as ever, but his role had evolved from bridge between species to teacher for the next generation of enhanced minds. Young humans and Zephyrians gathered around him daily, learning to navigate the complexities of multi-species consciousness with the patience and wisdom that only a faithful companion could provide. Dr. Hayes approached the memorial site with her morning readings, her research into consciousness integration having led to medical breakthroughs that were extending healthy lifespans across multiple species. The beacon's emanations provided data streams that helped her understand how enhanced awareness affected biological processes, knowledge that was being shared freely through the Galactic Cooperation Network. "Good morning, old friend," she said to Rex, scratching behind his ears in the familiar gesture that still brought his tail wagging. Through their enhanced connection, she could sense Jack's consciousness acknowledging her presence. His distributed awareness touched with the warmth of recognition that transcended the boundaries of individual identity. Sheriff Santos, now serving as Earth's representative to the Galactic Peacekeeping Council, paused during her morning walk to place fresh wildflowers at the beacon's base. The memorial had become a pilgrimage site for beings from across the galaxy who came to study the Montana model of voluntary transformation and cooperative evolution. "Jack, you should see what Scout accomplished yesterday," she said, addressing the beacon as naturally as she might speak to an old friend. "That young pup of Rex's helped negotiate a trade agreement between the crystalline miners of Kepler 442b and the energy beings from the Veil Nebula. You'd be proud of how your example keeps inspiring new solutions." The memorial beacon pulsed brighter in response, its quantum matrix carrying Jack's consciousness across the vast distances that separated Earth from the dozens of worlds where similar transformation processes were taking place. Through the beacon, his voice reached the growing community of enhanced minds, carrying the gentle wisdom that had guided him through life in the Montana wilderness. The memorial beacon serves as more than just remembrance. Jack's message resonated through the enhanced minds gathered around the monument. It's a reminder that the most important changes often begin with small acts of courage in unexpected places. Martha always said that home is where you make your stand for what matters most. Rex's offspring, now numbering in the dozens and scattered across multiple star systems as diplomatic liaisons, maintained their connection to the memorial beacon as a source of guidance and inspiration. Their natural telepathic abilities had become the foundation for a new form of interspecies communication that preserved individual identity while enabling unprecedented cooperation. Children from Cedar Falls and the surrounding communities played in the memorial garden, their laughter mixing with the harmonic frequencies generated by young Zephyrians learning human emotional expressions. These children, growing up bilingual in human speech and telepathic communication, represented the first generation to consider galactic citizenship as natural as local community membership. As the morning sun illuminated the memorial beacon's crystalline surface, its pulse synchronized with similar monuments on worlds throughout the galaxy, each one marking a moment when ordinary individuals chose cooperation over conquest, understanding over fear. The beacon's light carried across space the enduring message that transformation was always possible, that the choice between consumption and nurturing remained available to every consciousness willing to embrace it. Rex settled more comfortably beside the beacon, his aging body warmed by the morning sun, while his enhanced mind touched the vast network of consciousness that had grown from one old man's decision to listen rather than fear. Through the memorial beacon, Jack Morrison's legacy continued to guide the galaxy toward a future where diversity strengthened unity, where individual sacrifice served universal hope, and where the wilderness wisdom of Montana had become a template for cosmic cooperation. The beacon pulsed once more, carrying its message of transformation and hope to the stars, where new worlds waited to discover that first contact need not mean last chances, but rather the beginning of possibilities that spanned the universe itself.